morning, everyone.
Morning.
Thank you for joining our 5th consecutive Biotech Atelier, which seems to be as successful as every meeting until now. I'm very proud to announce that we have distinguished panelists and a very interesting bunch of participants coming from 55 countries virtually all around the world. The good thing is that we decided this year to do it online, which gives us the chance to invite lecturers from different parts of the world, of course, considering the time difference. And now, of course, I would like to start with the first session, which is also extremely interesting. It is dedicated to the modern trends and developments in medicine. We here have a very nice combination of lecturers. The gender balance is absolutely kept. Unfortunately, our good friend Bogi Eliasen texted a desperate message yesterday in the evening that he is in a traffic house in Latin America, so he will either be late or missing the session. But anyway, we will start now with our first lecturer today. This is Mrs. Sibilia Quilici. She is the Executive Director of Vaccines Europe at FPA. Mrs. Quilici, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. Shall I share myself the slides? And I've got a few slides to cover. Or you have those?
Yes, your slides are ready. You can share your slides, or we can share your slides. It's up to you.
I can share, and you tell me if I do that. Up.
Yes.
Perfect.
Perfect.
So
thank you very much.
And thank you for the invitation, and I'm very pleased to be part of this discussion. There were in the request angle to share with regards to how things evolved with regards to the healthcare, notably with a shift towards more prevention, where vaccines is quite a good example. So I wanted to use the vaccines and the vaccination case as a kind of case study, but really to raise the questions related to the evolution of the healthcare systems and what this means also for innovation and equitable access to innovation in Europe. So very briefly, I mean, and keeping you really this as a case study, is vaccination is one of the most major primary prevention public health tools that we have today after clean water. Is very cost effective, if not cost saving. It saves millions of lives per year. And it's a significant he has a significant public health and economic impact globally. I mean, at the regional, at the country level, at the regional level, but also globally. And when we look at the return on investments really related to vaccination is beyond positive. And this is for very, very little cost with regards to for the healthcare system. So very cheap type of primary prevention public health tools available today with a strong return on investment, but as we've seen, with very little support and emphasis with regards to the value it brings to the society. So just to give an overview today with regards to vaccination, we can prevent in a routine basis through national immunization programs from pediatrics to older adults, 20 infectious diseases and related cancers through routine immunization. So I don't go too much through the details. You have here the diseases that are prevented for pediatrics, for and adolescents, for adults and older adults, quite a significant amount of infectious diseases that are prevented. And you can imagine that if we didn't have the vaccines available today, what this would mean in terms of burdens of disease, but also death and issues related to life expectancy. And when we look at how this works with the countries, so for countries, you have a national immunization program that recommends the vaccines to the population, and then it is or it is not funded by the national healthcare system. So from that perspective, when you look at Europe, on those amount of infectious diseases that can be prevented by a national program, only 8 vaccines will be publicly funded in Romania, for example, versus 18 vaccines in Italy or Greece. So a huge gap, a huge differences with regards to the level of protection you can bring to citizens, depending on which country you're part of. So there is a need, in fact, to shift the mindset from care to prevention. And I will go a little bit more in the detail there. When we look at COVID-19 vaccination, it was really interesting case study here again, because COVID-19 vaccination is an adult immunization. It's not a pediatric vaccination, it's an adult. So something different compared to what people have in mind when they think about vaccination or vaccines, they really think about pediatrics. Whereas today, and this is part also of the innovation and the evolution of what we can bring as an industry with regards to public health solutions, is that the offer is really from pediatrics to elderly. So we can really prevent diseases across the life course. And when we look at these are the ECDC data related to the coverage rates. So, so the uptake of the vaccination against COVID-19 across the region in the, well, mainly the adult population, in fact, because this was the first targeted population. And we see here that although we managed to get across the region a fairly decent coverage rate with over 70% coverage rate in a very short period of time, you actually have discrepancies across the region. So with Portugal that really managed to have really high uptake of this adult immunization with beyond 90%, you have Bulgaria, for example, sorry to take the example, but it's quite a good case here, with as low as close to 30% with regards to the uptake of the schedule that was required, minimum 2 doses of these COVID-19 vaccines. So a huge difference. And what can explain these differences between the country? But clearly there is, despite the fact the vaccines were available for every country at the same time in a very short period of time, there is a difference in terms of equity in access, because not the same amount of population could actually be vaccinated from a country to another one. And why is that? So I will come back to that. But in fact, it's important to reflect on how all of this is actually coming from and funded, and to know that almost 80% of the EU countries spend less than 0.5% of their healthcare budget on immunization. So going back to what I've said with regards to the quantity of infectious disease we can prevent, this is less than 1% of the healthcare budget on immunization today in the budget of the countries. And in fact, overall, with regards to prevention at large, so not only immunization, but prevention that we can really all prevention, even prevention, road safety is included in that, is less than 3% of the health budget. And if we consider that prevention can be an important part of the resiliency, for example, of the how to build resilient healthcare system, then maybe 3% of the healthcare budget dedicated to preventative measures in health clearly might not be enough. And when we look at specifically to immunization, this is very low, meaning that you don't have much in terms of budget to procure the vaccines, so that's one, but not only, to ensure actually the training of your healthcare providers, to ensure the infrastructure related to access to vaccine and vaccination, related to the communication and the awareness campaigns that you need, because vaccination is quite a specific public health tool as well, and has a specificity of vaccine hesitancy that you need to look at very carefully, and vaccines confidence that you need to build. And this is how you build a strong infrastructure. And in the absence of a strong infrastructure, you cannot implement correctly. And all of this needs budget. In the same way, and I know this is also part of the discussion, is about digitalization. We need to have timely data, for example, to know where the uptake are, so that if you're below what we are looking at, you can run the right campaign. But today, you don't have at all any idea, apart from COVID-19, which is a specific case, an idea of your coverage rates for any of the vaccines that are part of the national immunization programs across the region. So no data, no ability to take fast decision for the benefit of the population. There is also, this also creates, in fact, complexity to roll out an immunization program. So we've been quite successful once more in the context of the pandemic in reaching high coverage rates. But maybe we could have done better. We could have done better because we actually spent time to build the infrastructure for convenience in access, vaccination center, plenty of new ideas came up in order to fasten as much as possible the access to adult immunization, because all of that was not available. We would have had a pediatric vaccination program, might have gone faster because the whole infrastructure in every country was available. So gaps and delays in the rollout. And clearly, the lack and the absence of budget is creating delay in the access to novel vaccines, and this would be true for new preventative measures in any case. And the issue here is that prevention and vaccination is still seen as a cost, because it's a cost in the healthcare budget, rather than being seen as an investment in health and a contribution to the resiliency of the healthcare system. When we look at access, so equitable access to vaccines across Europe, here is, we did a study over the last 3 years, so it was quite an extensive study in 27 member states, with regards to how long it takes for countries to integrate new vaccines in their national immunization programs once there is a marketing authorization by the European Medicines Agency. And you can see here there is quite a discrepancy across the region, with 7 countries that manage actually to bring an innovative vaccines to the market in less than 10 years, about 10 countries that manage between 2 and 6 years, another bunch of countries that takes more than 6 years to bring an innovative vaccines on the market. And this is huge, because we are talking about here infectious diseases, and we learned from COVID-19 that viruses have no borders. So if you do not manage to protect your citizens in a broad manner at the regional level fast enough, basically you give the chance for the viruses to spread and to continue impacting the health of your population, the socioeconomic consequences that we know about, and of course the burden on the healthcare system. And all of this is also related to country readiness. And country readiness is really important and key to achieve, in order to achieve equity in access. So here is just specific to vaccines, but it's worth looking at how things work across the region for the different products. But we look at what's going on with regards to vaccines horizon scanning. So this ability to actually know what is going to come next as part of the pipeline of the industry. Very few countries actually do this horizon scanning and get prepared with regards to what is going to come next in terms of proposals for innovative solutions against preventative or infectious diseases. So 14 countries only out of the 27 member states doing their horizon scanning. When we look at the HTA body recommendation, for example, to evaluate the new vaccines, only 12 countries actually do this through a proper HTA body. And this goes beyond, I mean, the whole market access pathway could be looked at, and there is a huge discrepancy between the member states on how they assess and how they get ready to bring an innovative product like primary prevention product like vaccines to their market. And this is raising really interesting questions with regards to what needs to be done. And clearly we need a much more transparent and clear decision-making and harmonized decision-making process across the regions that really needs to be timely in the sense of ensuring that the countries perform their horizon scanning and really and early advice and strengthen their national advisory groups resources in order to foresee what is going to come. It needs to be inclusive with regards to to which stakeholders to be involved in this assessment, and ensuring that the civil society is also part of the dialogue. It has to be consistent by adopting a clear decision analysis framework and through good implementation also of the new EU regulation on the health technology assessment. And last but not the least, the transparency and making sure that the whole process is transparent, that the role of the public bodies are well clarified, and that there is publication of the rationale for recommendation as well as the policy decision. So just to give a summary and to not spend too much time, here the idea is really we need a shift in mindset. We need a shift in mindset from care to prevention, where the countries, where our stakeholders understand that prevention in health is an investment and not a cost, and therefore we need to switch also the budget that is dedicated to prevention, because prevention can be a significant pillar to build the resilience of our healthcare system. And this is definitely one of the lessons learned from the pandemic, is the need for a stronger and more resilient healthcare systems in order to protect the health of the population in case of external threats. Equitable access to innovation is dependent on country readiness, as I just mentioned, with regards to also ensuring the right funding to the innovative products, and the access and decision-making process that really need to be also more comprehensive, more transparent, rely on the new EU regulation on health technology assessment, and already leveraging as well the opportunity of the joint clinical HTA, which will harmonize the decision process, the evaluation, and avoid duplication of resources. I pause here. I hope this was quite comprehensive enough and will drive an interesting discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It was really a very nice presentation and extremely informative. I have a brief question in terms of the pending participation of Bogi, Eliasen. I think we will have more time at the end to discuss more, but a rapid question. How do you see the future of the vaccines in direction, not prevention, but therapeutic vaccines?
That's a really good question. And honestly, we are right in actually a big discussion moment in how you define actually therapeutic vaccines, because there are different directions here. You will have vaccines is made for naive people, naive related to infection, right? So the vaccine is meant to prevent an infection in naive people. But we see therapeutic vaccines in the sense where vaccines will be still targeting a virus, an infection, but in people that are not naive. I'll take the example of hepatitis B, for example, for which we have candidates, therapeutic vaccines for people that has been infected with hepatitis B, and with the aim to treat through the vaccines or get rid of the consequence of the infection and to treat a patient with hepatitis B infection. So that's one angle. But then we see also another angle, which is much more in the immunotherapy type of activities, and where we see vaccines to treat cancer tumor in that regard. And a lot of work is happening in that direction. The mRNA technology also really opens the floor to even more prospect with regards to innovative vaccines in that regard. So for me, it's a new era. It's a really new era because we are really opening the concept of vaccines and vaccination beyond the primary prevention that I covered in my presentation. But I think that it would be also very important to agree on the terminology. And because this will condition as well how the product will be evaluated. So there is a full regulatory process that is specific to vaccines, for example, in the context of traditional vaccines, which might not fit with the need for therapeutic vaccines, for example. The way the evaluation is being done on the product in the same way. So how will this be actually evaluated? And then how this is implemented and how this is also presented to the citizens and the patient, because Primary prevention has the specificities I mentioned with regards to vaccine hesitancy. The therapeutic part generally do not have hesitancy because people being sick want to be treated. But we need to be very clear. We also see use of monoclonal antibodies, for example, in prophylactics, and this is coming fast, which is not in the area of vaccines, but has a role of primary prevention. So how all this is going to be also integrated in the full portfolio, I would say, of preventative measures and against infections, but also cancer, is going to be interesting.
Thank you very much. I have also one further question, but I will put this question if we have time. Otherwise, we will direct it to you via email or another channel. Now it's my pleasure to give the floor to Dr. Krasimira Chemishanska. Dr. Krasimira Chemishanska is a good friend of the Biotech Atelier. She has been extremely supportive in the 5 years of existence, and also is a very well recognized opinion leader in Bulgaria in terms of personalized medicine. Dr. Chemishanska, the General Manager of Amgen Bulgaria, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Georgiev. I will share my presentation. And just let me know when you could see my slides.
We see your slides already.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I will focus on an area that is most known to me, actually, the biotechnology, drug discovery and design. And thank you very much for the opportunity to take part in this particular panel. I will start by quoting Kirby Alton, who was one of the founders of Amgen in the distant 1981, when he mentioned that biotechnology is just beginning. The biotechnology revolution starts, and what it will bring in the next years, it is hard to imagine. And really, we were witnessing a real biotechnology revolution, starting with the discoveries in human biology in the mid of last century. A lot of the most grievous and life-threatening diseases, the treatment paradigm for these diseases changed completely. And the life expectancy and quality of life of these patients has completely changed. But why do we still claim that this revolution is continuing and it has a future? Actually, the current state of life sciences and the in-depth knowledge of biology combined with genetics and the whole technology, data science knowledge that we currently have access to sets really new standards in engineering the next generation of drugs. Of course, the focus of all the pharma innovative companies, including Amgen, is on the most serious diseases that bring and impose the highest burden to society, to the individual, and to different families, like cancer, like chronic chronic diseases, like cardiovascular diseases, osteoporosis, and many other. The trend is definitely going towards not so much focus on the disease itself, but putting the patient journey, the patient needs, and the patient profile, also including genetic profile, in focus, so that the innovative new generation drugs are more and more personalized, and we are speaking now of really precision medicine for this particular patient in this particular stage of his disease development. Human genetics, of course, has a pivotal role in the drug discovery and drug design nowadays. Amgen started one of the most broadest in human history of science genomic projects for identifying and validating drug targets, which is playing really a pivotal role for the drug development nowadays. Another thing that is quite important in our concept for drug development is the biology first approach. The identified genetic targets, actually they can be found in different tissues in the cell itself, inside the cell, or on the cell surface. So in the molecular engineering process, the biology first approach means that these specifics of the target, being it the genetic specifics or the tissue specifics, are targeted with different modalities, with different tools that are the most adequate approach, represent the most adequate approach to this particular target. What I mean is, for example, small molecules, small molecules could enter, for example, the cells and could target some targets into the cells. For example, monoclonal antibodies hit precisely some receptors on the cell surface. Bispecific antibodies are meant to target two targets simultaneously, and BITE molecules, which I will mention in some of the next slides. BITE molecules are meant to engage the individual's own T cell, and this T cell should recognize the cancer cell and this particular cancer cell and kill it. So it is a different modality, and this biology first approach towards the selected target is the basis really of finding a very efficient way to hit this particular target. Now, with the current developments of technology, the humankind can really store and analyze huge databases in different aspects. For drug discovery and drug development, genomics, the genetic databases of the population, certain population groups, the transcriptomics, actually the study of the gene activation, proteomics, the databases that we have on protein, how proteins are built and what role they play, as well as the phenotype database, the clinical databases of big population, human populations, give enormous opportunities to analyze and combine this data in the process of drug discovery, to really validate drug targets, to measure the size of the effect on certain disease population, as well as to really see what is the structure of the protein in healthy individuals as well as the diseased population. A very schematic approach of the use of these data. If a rare genetic variant is identified in certain population, it is compared to the real-world data, the clinical data, the phenotypic database of this particular patient group, and you can see that there are certain disease matches in this particular population, and when the two cards are matched with each other, you can identify easily that this particular genetic rare mutation matches with a certain disease representation in particular patients. So this is a very high-level schematic approach to visualize how these rich databases can be used and combined. The next step is to really identify the high-risk population, which will be of most helpful to prove really the validity of the concept and that this identified drug target is really the one that will be potentially most effective. Acceleration of clinical trials through different new innovative trial designs like adaptive trial designs, which I will mention further, are key in order to bring innovative drugs quicker to the patient and deliver really new therapies that are proving value-added characteristics. And in a nutshell, all that I have covered as resources and approaches builds the Amgen digital biologics discovery platform that combines the already traditional protein discovery and engineering, the analysis and prediction, including the genomic database analysis, the automation of and robotics of all these drug discovery processes. On top of that, in this new discovery platform, there is a massive use of artificial intelligence and machine learning technologies, as well as the sequence to structure prediction, which are quite new. So in a nutshell, the fusion of this life science knowledge that we have acquired together with the data science really help to have the general principles of the new drug discovery and drug development approach. Of course, real-world data play a key factor in this process. Amgen was the first company to receive approval of one of its cancer drugs, comparing it to real-world data for patients with the same cancer, using the argument that this particular comparative group of patients have already failed to the standard of treatment of care. So they were compared to the new successfully, and the benefits of the new treatment was proven comparing to this particular group of patients. And last but not least, I mentioned the adaptive clinical trials. This is a new approach, and Amgen is leading in this respect, putting on the same platform several molecules and using the same mechanism of action to target different diseases or different targets. This gives the opportunity to analyze incoming data, to make very flexible changes in the trial design in the course of the trial, to change the doses or target a different population group. The adaptive clinical trial design has already been accepted also, and the value of it has been seen by FDA. So Amgen is partnering with FDA already on this particular way of clinical R&D and clinical trial proceeding. It brings faster cycle of faster and shorter times. The promise is that the clinical trial time can be shortened by half, or even by to 1/4 of the initial. And of course, this is related to lower R&D costs and the opportunity to invest in other innovative options. So just one illustration of this adaptive trial design is the bispecific T-cell engager, the so-called BITE platform, which is designed to close the space between the T cells and the tumor cells. And currently on this platform, through this adaptive trial design, 10 BITE molecules are actually being investigated in different trials. And practically this platform provides the opportunity the individual T cells to be engaged to kill practically any tumor cell. So this really will give a big push and will shorten the time to the patient and really give the opportunity to assess the value in the course of the trial. So this was all that I meant to mention. I will be happy to answer any questions. Thank you very much.
I have to thank you because your lecture was extremely interesting and also opens nicely the door to our next lecture, Paul. But before giving the floor to him, I have a question because I have been taking notes on your presentation, and I have seen that you mentioned that 65% of your non-oncology portfolio is genetically validated.
Yes,
and also you mentioned that you think that there will be no undruggable diseases. If this is correct, how do you think the future will develop? Do you think that innovative companies like Amgen will be investing more in development of general drugs or drugs for personalized medicine? Where is the future actually?
I think, yeah, the concept of what I really shared with you, the new approach to drug design and discovery is really meant to identify targets that were not accessible up to now through different therapeutic options and were practically meant as undruggable. So identifying these hidden targets is one of the Amgen's objectives of the short and medium-term drug discovery. And of course, this will very much push the company towards identifying and personalizing more and more its medicines towards particular groups of patients which have these genetic mutations most often and will benefit the most from these particular therapies. And I will give here an example of the recent trials on, it's again another platform that we are working on, the G12C mutation, which is one in the KRAS system, one of the mutations in the KRAS system, and now has been tested in different solid tumor types to really identify this group of patients that will, with this rare mutation, for example, in non-small cell lung cancer, 13% of the population with metastatic non-small cell lung cancer proves to have this particular mutation and are expected to value the most from this particular new product. Also, as answering to your question, Amgen is also trying to identify more broader targets that, for example, will serve particular populations in more general disease like hypercholesterolemia, for example, where you identify certain drug targets that are valid for a broader population group. So in a nutshell, answering your question, both directions are valid.
Thank you very much. Thank you once again for your continuous support for our event. And also I am definitely obliged to say that Amgen was one of the first companies in Bulgaria who opened the door for personalized treatment of colorectal cancer. And you made actually the breakthrough in this direction in the Bulgarian healthcare. So Thank you once
again.
again.
Thank you, Dr. Georgiev, and thank you to the Biotech Atelier team for this really, I think, interesting and innovative conferences and exchange of scientific opinions that we are part of. Thank you very much.
Yes, please stay with us because there will be definitely further questions for you. Paul, now the floor is yours. Paul Jones is one of the veterans of the Biotech Atelier. I think that you have participated almost in every event. You are now the CEO of Vortex Biosciences. And please tell us what you are doing. Your lectures are
great to see you again. Thank you for the invite to join you again for another year. There are some common themes here, and so I'll try and be very brief and focus around three key themes in relation to the question that you asked: what does the future hold? And I wanted to pull out three key aspects of my experience over the last decade, where I sense we'd started to do something, and as I reflect on those, I think we're at the beginning of the journey. We're just scratching the surface, and there is an opportunity to double down on some of these aspects that I'll highlight and use them as themes to focus on going forward. So first of these, and I'll have just one slide on each, one or two slides on each, is this principle of how do we create a learning health system? And this reflects back on my time almost a decade ago now at Genomics England, where we were creating a really large-scale program that almost by definition wove together the research agenda with the clinical agenda and brought industry to the table. And that's really what I mean when I talk about this principle of a learning health system. How do we get those fundamentally different agendas, research, clinical and industry, working more collaboratively together at large scale, as it certainly was in Genomics England case and continues to this day at population level? So that's one key theme I'd like to put out there, as we could do far better as we look to the future on that basis. The other key aspect, and this really reflects perhaps on the last 5 years of my career around working very closely with many countries around the world, taking that national population level experience and specifically from an Illumina perspective, looking at how we could help them make the case for why this made sense to integrate genomics into health systems at very large scales. And one of the things that struck me is the opportunity to build these benefits cases in the broadest sense, but to take multi-stakeholder perspectives on it. So there is obviously huge value in making a clinical case, but I also sense that you can make a case from different perspectives. And how might we do that to help move forward agendas more rapidly, more quickly, because we're getting returns on investment, not just from any one perspective, but from multiple perspectives. And I think there's a huge amount more we could do around that aspect, looking forward to building these cases for investing. And then I sense, and this really reflects on the current role I'm in now, there are some really innovative technologies. And I sense that these innovative technologies can provide specific use cases that can help set a new precedent for how to make change happen, how to transform healthcare in the future. And sometimes those leading edge, in many cases bleeding edge use cases, can help change a system, and some of the more obvious use cases can follow in the same path. So that's the third theme that I just like to emphasize. And as I say, I'll just pull out one key slide on each over the next 5 minutes. So what do I mean by learning health system? Well, clearly it needs to start with the patient-citizen agenda. How do you engage them, help them understand, and then act on the principles? But then I've woven together this idea of a clinical, a research, and an economic or an industry agenda into the mix. And clearly each of these agendas exist already in a very large scale system at a national level. And I won't define the specifics because people would be very familiar with what happens in a clinical versus a research or an economic development agenda. The key point is they are different agendas, but actually to orientate them around a common table can be a really powerful prospect. And the key question is, well, how do you do that? How do you bring those different agendas to a common table so that you can encourage people who can come to the table and get out what they need, but there are synergistic benefits in relation to the other agendas there. And ideally, you can weave the benefits and outputs from one agenda to inform and feed into another agenda. And ideally, that would be a never-ending cycle that would continue and continue to feed and grow. One of the key things that struck me, particularly over as I've worked with this at large-scale system level, is this idea that the clinical emphasis is very locally defined. by the nature of the healthcare system within a country, but actually the research agenda is often globally defined. You know, when you bring industry participants such as pharma companies to the table, they have a global perspective. And so the nice thing here is if you can get a country agenda moving and you can get connected to the research community who have a global perspective, when you move to another country, you can bring that same community to that common agenda. Whereas the clinical agenda will need to be defined and owned locally in each case. That was quite an interesting insight. That means that I think there are some efficiencies here, particularly in terms of engaging the research and the economic development agenda on a broader basis. The key question is, well, what can you use to drive this? And certainly when I had a genomics hat on, we talked about this principle of a genomics engine, that, if you like, was the mechanism for bringing these different agendas together and acted very efficiently. It's a concept, but in practical terms, if I reflect back on Genomics England experience, it revolved around the idea of creating a national lab that generated whole genome sequencing at scale that clinicians and the researchers in the UK could access in order to get that standardized output. So that's just one example of how you can create an engine that can drive efficiencies that connects these different agendas together. And then in terms of an overarching approach, almost one of the most important things I would encourage people to think about is, well, how do you set these up in the right way to drive change? And that really comes back to, well, how do you establish the mandate? How do you evaluate the big decisions that are going to be made? And how do you operationalize the interface into each of these agendas going forward? So that's, in essence, the principles behind what a learning health system can evolve. And I see a huge opportunity as I look to the future to drive that at even greater scale than I've experienced in the past. Just picking up on my second point, this idea of a multi-stakeholder benefits case. We were often challenged at a country level to say, well, why should I do this? If I'm a government, why should I invest X million dollars in what you're proposing as something that might dramatically change the health system? Well, we naturally are inclined from a health economic perspective to look at clinical utility, a clinical benefits case. And that's absolutely appropriate. And I'm conscious what Andrew, I think, going to speak after me now, and welcome his perspective on this. But I've also seen the potential opportunity to take different perspectives here in evaluating the benefits of making the change happen. And when you start to stitch those different agendas together, identify value from each of those different perspectives, and align it across a value chain that might start with prevention and early detection and move through diagnosis and treatment selection before then ideas of ongoing disease monitoring, you can start to unpack what value might mean from each of those perspectives at those different stages. You can put that together in a model that then allows you to really look at what would be the returns for each of the stakeholders across the breadth of these agendas. That means that you get a much stronger case, admittedly with a longer term perspective, that you can use to monitor and track the unlocking of these value benefits over time. And I've certainly been involved in trying to create this concept and then use it to encourage investment in large scale programs as we drive change. And the third key point I just wanted to emphasize, the one I'm involved in now, is really bleeding edge technology. In this particular case, looking at the principle of liquid biopsy, and how do you get that adopted into large scale systems using some of the themes that I've been talking about already in the last few minutes. When you talk about liquid biopsy, we're primarily talking about ctDNA. In my particular case, we're focused around circulating tumor cells. Exosomes also form part of the agenda here. And the key principle is this is potentially a novel innovation that could have huge benefits, particularly for monitoring cancer patients, potential for early detection. So everything along that value chain that I identified earlier. And the key question I'm asking myself now in the role that I'm in is, well, how do we use some of the learnings over the last decade, looking to the future to say, well, how could we encourage this academic clinical engagement, the industry engagement around some of the principles that we've learned to drive an agenda that means that this innovation can accelerate towards making a difference for patients in time? What can we use and do in order to make that happen more quickly than the traditional cycle that may well take 20 years for a new innovation to hit the clinic? in this particular case, we're talking about driving a service-based approach around circulating tumor cell center of excellence. We're looking at building interfaces into each of those agendas. We're looking at the data opportunity that arises from this. So all themes that the other speakers have already touched upon, but I think that it's often quite useful to think about specific use cases that can set new precedents for how these things can be adopted at scale. So just my final slide, Dimitar, and then I'll hand back to you, is it's actually a quote that I've used before, I think in a previous Biotech Atelier, from a former chairman at Genomics England, that was encouraging us to take a perspective around health that said, look, let's treat it as an investment and not just a cost. I love the quote, you know, where he talks here about the principle of people living longer with a lower instance of chronic disease, being more economically productive later in life whilst reducing the overall cost of health. What's not to like about that? So if that becomes the overarching goal for where we're driving in the future, question I'm asking myself is, how can we enable learning health systems? How can we develop multi-stakeholder benefits cases? And how can we use specific use cases to drive achieving that vision? Thanks, Dimitar. Dimitar, you're on mute. Oh,
sorry.
Yeah.
Now I'm muted.
Yeah.
Actually, I think that everybody is muted until you are speaking, but anyway. So today I have seen a very interesting information published that the National Institute of Health is launching a 42.5 million program to elaborate the function of every single gene. Do you think this is a good direction? Is this something you are for, or you think that this is too early or useless?
No, I think it's a phenomenally good thing, Dimitar. I'm fully in support. And I mean, if you go back to the whole Human Genome Project, you know, to 25 years ago, that was initiated. There were people asking questions about the benefits that would come from that. I think my only challenge, and I go back to the same theme that I just presented, is how do we make sure that we accelerate the benefits that can come out of that and apply them more quickly into the clinic, and not just allow it to filter across, you know, these semi-permeable membranes into different agendas over time? How can we facilitate and proactively connect the benefits across the different people that may see the upside of these kind of programs happening? So don't leave it just in research. Let's translate it as quickly as we can.
Thank you very much. I have been expecting this answer, but anyway, I was obliged to ask you, what do you think? Because probably there are also other opinions. Anyway, now we have 2-3 minutes for questions, and there is one question from the audience to Mrs. Quilici. Are there any good example of countries in the EU which were able to shorten the time to market for vaccines? And what was the strategy actually of those countries to shorten the time to market? You have, Mrs. Quilici, 2 minutes to answer.
Okay, thank you for the question. So case studies on, because what I presented is just been published. So we have like, it's kind of a state of play of where we are at with time to access. So whether countries already took advance the opportunity to reduce their time to access, I won't know honestly. What I do know is that some countries definitely switched to looking at immunization, primary prevention as an investment, and with really the aim to complete their national immunization programs to ensure a complete a calendar and consequently to increase the budget that is dedicated to immunization in that regard. And this was the case of Italy several years ago, back to I think 2016, where they decided to review completely their national immunization program, ensure that all available vaccines were going to be part of that program, and what would be the consequence from a budget standpoint and the need for budget. And this was the outcome of definitely a multi-stakeholder endeavor, where all the scientific societies got together with the civil society in order to make the recommendation to the Ministry of Health at that time, if I'm correct. So a case study, I would mention Italy. Whether this actually reduced the time to access, I won't know, honestly, because we don't have enough thinking. But what I think we are bringing here is also the evidence today. We know that it was not available before, so we know. So it gives a good ground for the countries now to look at what is going on and what can be improved.
Thank you very much. Is actually Vaccine Europe also planning some more activities in order to give better access to vaccines in Europe?
So we work already in generating that evidence, so that's very important. We are calling for more transparency, but also more dialogue with our stakeholders. We, in that regard, so we are building a pipeline review. So I would have liked to be able to share it today, but I'm not in the position because we initiated this work earlier this year, and with the aim to be hopefully publishable by November. That's my target. But once we have this pipeline review, this will give definitely a better vision for the member states and the national technical advisory groups to assess what is going to come next, and to really give this opportunity to anticipate and foresee, and what budget would be needed, what type of assessment will be needed, evaluation, ensuring the resources for the evaluation is anticipated. And so that should also help in contributing to a faster access in that regard. So that's a work that we are currently doing that was not done before by the trade association. And we are covering 15 members, 15 vaccines companies today. So we don't have all of them, but we have a really good major part of the vaccine industries that are operating in Europe. So this pipeline review, which is focusing only on Vaccines Europe members today, 15 members, would give a good glance of what would come next, although not complete. And I hope to be able to have a much more complete one on the years to come, where we have new members joining us as well.
Thank you very much. Dr. Chemishanska, brief question to you. Is Amgen also eyeing vaccine developments?
No, I haven't heard of such plans, no.
Well, probably in the close future, because it seems that vaccines will be more and more popular. I'm from the old generation, and I have been vaccinated for almost everything with what exists. And I have a good life being vaccinated. So
yes, I do believe in vaccines, and I was also vaccinated for all all that was offered. But I'm not aware of any plans to, at least for the mid-term, and I don't know for the longer term, Amgen to focus on vaccines. But who knows? Who knows?
Thank you. And
Thank
Paul,
you.
the last question is for you. In terms of liquid biopsies, do you think that soon liquid biopsy will be offered not only in oncology, but also in other diseases?
I think it's definitely got potential. I do. I think there's still a way to go in oncology to prove the case, but I think if we can do it in oncology, there's no question people are starting to explore alternatives.
Okay, thank you very much. This was a nice answer. So now I'm extremely pleased to close this very fruitful session.